All right, so there's lots of different types of tests out there. You don't have to be an expert on each one, but if you find something that's happening over and over again, you can kind of investigate it a little bit and learn more. So we're going to take a look at some examples of these different types of tests, the type of questions you might find, and kind of set you up for success around that. One that's a cognitive test, looking at your overall, cognitive ability, your ability to solve problems, understand instructions, motivation, maybe a little bit of personality in there too, is Wonderlic. Now, if you're from the United States, you might have heard of Wonderlic. It's something that the National Football League, the NFL, has used in the past. I think they still use it very extensively to give to people they're drafting to join their team, particularly for like quarterbacks and things like that. So it's famous from that aspect, this Wonderlic. And you get a score. You take the Wonderlic exam, you get a score, and from that, employers or hiring people can interpret your cognitive ability with the Wonderlic. Now, online, you can take a free test. It's kind of a free test guide. I got the link here for you. It's all be in the supporting materials too, from Test Guide is the name of the company. And you can take a practice Wonderlic test and get a feel for what it's like. Here's a sample question for you. For example, on the following dates, which is the latest, right? Well, if you look at it long enough, you'll be able to answer that, right? Which is the latest date. Now, here's the trick to this, though. See where it says time remaining? The Wonderlic is a very time-oriented test where you need to answer questions very, very quickly. So you can see here, like in this example, this is just for the example, not necessarily depends. It could vary depending on what you get from an employer, but in this example, you've got 50 questions and 12 minutes to complete. And I've taken some of these online with these Wonderlic practice tests. It's hard to finish. I mean, I'm trying desperately to try to finish. So for me, and I'm a pretty smart guy, but sometimes it can be hard to finish. So don't let that get you down. But understand that it's very much a time-oriented test, kind of designed to make you think fast or move quickly through it. Again, read the instructions carefully. Are you penalized for giving a wrong answer or not? If you're not penalized for giving a wrong answer, if you're down to your last 10 seconds and you got 4 questions left, just fill in something. Just choose anything. You might get lucky, at that point, and at least get something right than leaving it blank. But you have to understand, read the instructions, see if you're penalized for a wrong answer, or if you're not penalized, then at the end, guess on. But that's Wonderlic. You get a feel for what a Wonderlic looks like. One that's very common is the DISC personality test. And basically, this is a personality test. It's going to see whether the idea is it's going to spit back out after you take the test and answer these questions. Do you like to lead teams, that kind of stuff, strongly agree, disagree, whatever it might be. And you, or whatever's more like you, they'll give you a statement. I'll show you an example here in a second of the question. But the idea of the DISC personality is it's fit for that type of job. And you can see DISC stands for something. If we start at the upper left there in the green, D is for dominance, I for influence, S steadiness, and C conscientiousness. And then those bubbles are related to it. So if you're dominant, you're very results oriented and direct. You might be an A-type person or a manager who's very direct. C might be, real precise, analytical, you're very detail oriented. Steadiness is you're supportive, you're patient, you're helpful. And then I is you're an influencer, right? So you're enthusiastic, you're outgoing. In particular, you might be persuasive, able to convince people of things. So there are jobs that are related to this that then kind of match up to that, right? So if we look at just one example, it might be a manager role on the D side. You may be a demanding boss, somebody who needs to be really in charge, large and in charge, might be a high and a D. You get different ratings on these different DICS, and you're more like a certain personality that stands out and it's kind of graphed. An accountant might be more of that C, right? Think of those words, analytical, detail-oriented. An accountant is, you want accountants to be high in C. Supportive, patient, steadiness. A teacher could be like that. Now, this is not necessarily universal, but, in general, if I was to hire a teacher, or a school district was, or maybe somebody who's really supportive of the students and patient, might be really good. Influence, that's actually me, by the way. I'm high I, I'm a high influence. Common positions might be a salesperson, for example, who has to be persuasive. Maybe a lawyer who's trying to convince a jury. Very good also for managements and leaders too. You could be a high D as a leader and just be this kind of jerky, demanding person. Or you could be more of a high I, like to think, more of a high I, where you're influencing, you're really kind of leading a team together and you're really leading a team. But, you could be C and S and be a leader too as well. But this is the idea where they then put these different types of things. You take the personality, and if you're hiring a salesperson, for example, And they take the exam, the DISC personality test, and they come up really high C, and that's their dominant feature, that they're analytical and detail-oriented. Be like, that's not what I want with a salesperson. I want them to be persuasive. That's why salespeople, for example, have a reputation for not being detail-oriented or not getting their expense reports done on time, because they're not detail-oriented. They're more, that persuasiveness. But everybody's different. Everybody has a unique score, but they will have one of these 4 quadrants where they stand out and who they really are. Not who they are, but what the exam is saying who they are. And these exams tend to be somewhat right on. I mean, I know I'm a very influential and high influence person, so it did not surprise me that I was high I. And the questions on this, you can go to mydiscprofile.com and do some samples there or see some sample questions. A lot of times they look like this for the DISC profile, where you've got 2 kind of, columns where it says most like me or least like me, and then you answer the statement, right? Adopting a dominant attitude towards other, influencing other people's ideas, whatever. And then you just check the box that's most like you or least like you. So for that second one, influencing other people's ideas, oh, that's definitely most like me. So I would check that most like me. Remaining steady and calm all the time, yeah, I'm like that too, actually. So that's most like me. So that would be, but as you do more of these questions, you'll see I'll still end up more high I than I would with, let's say, being steady and calm. Complying with instructions and regulations, you think, well, yeah, that makes sense, but I would actually choose, for me, that's least like me, because I'm more of the other things, but also I like instructions and regulations, so don't get me wrong, but also I'm a risk taker, I'm a leader, I'm a manager, this like who I am, who I think I am, and who I want to be. And so I might not comply with a regulation or a company policy because I'm trying to change the policy or lead the company or lead the organization or at least my department in different directions. So I might say least like me, right, on that. Next, we have emotional intelligence, or EQ, or EI. EI is emotional intelligence, but you might get an EQ score, they'll call it, emotional intelligence quotient, or quotient is what they'll say. In emotional intelligence, you can see it's really trying to do these exams and get a feeling for a person's self-awareness, their empathy, how they relate to others in addition to their self, what motivates them, how are they able to self-regulate, and work under stress, work under pressure, and get a feel for their social skills too. Maybe a little more introverted, a little more extroverted, whatever it might be, and how do they work in a social environment? Do they get strength from that or less so? So emotional intelligence is looking at a whole kind of bag of things, and you get this EQ score. And once again, it's all graphed out that you might be high in self-awareness, but low in empathy, or whatever it might be. Again, it's another data point for a hiring company to make a decision around. Psychology Today here's a link to, and it'll be in the supporting materials, has an emotional intelligence test you can take for free online. And you can see some of the questions, and it's that whole completely true to completely false and different questions in between. I adjust my behavior depending on who I am interacting with. A child versus a professional versus your boss, and how true is that? So I might say, well, that's completely true for me, or I tend to postpone or avoid discussing touchy topics. I would say that's mostly false, maybe completely false. And once again, that's for me, because I kind of like confrontation a little bit more. You see how this is all starting to come together? I like confrontation, I like leadership. That's me though, but that's not necessarily who you are. I'm just saying this is what the emotional intelligence test is going to measure, and they're going to look to see what type of person they might want for the job. You can probably see for a job where they're looking for a lot of compliance, follow the rules, don't cause problems, don't lead, don't be a problem. I would not score well in tests for those types of positions. I will tell you right now, I'm much more aggressive, I guess. And then also in the next lesson, we're going to spend a little extra time around case study success. So there's some examples here just to give you a feel, but understand that these exams are there really to help the hiring company and give them another point of data that goes along with your application, your resume or CV, maybe a cover letter, supporting materials, sample of work, whatever it might be, and then all the interviews that you've gone through. Testing exams is another place for a company to use to make a decision, because it's so important to them, the hiring company, to make the right decision, because it's very, very costly to make the wrong decision.